done something well and following their patterns so you can achieve something similar. And I thought, well, if I'm going to talk about modeling success, who the heck am I going to talk about to around 5 minutes? You know, I could talk about Anthony Robbins. I worked for him. I could talk about my parents. They raised me pretty well. But I thought, no, you know, since I was a kid, there's always been a special group that I modeled. Superheroes. I love superheroes. You know, they embody something that all of us want, something better, something different. They embody creating change in the world and defending what's right. And I thought, well, if there was any superhero that I thought would be great, it would be Peter Parker, also known as Spiderman. Peter Parker is an average, everyday guy, just like you and me. He's a teacher, he's a photographer at times, and he was given a special talent, a special power. Now, one of the things that I learned by reading Spiderman throughout my life is that you have to surround yourself with people who are going to lift you higher. You know, Oprah Winfrey said that, and I think that Spiderman, throughout the years, has always sought out people to help him out. For instance, there was a point where, at 16 years old, he gets bit by a radioactive spider. Well, what are you going to do with powers at 16 years old? At first, he went and he used it to make money, but he found that wasn't fulfilling enough, so he started going to Daredevil and the Fantastic Four to learn exactly what he needed to do to create change with his powers. Then he surrounded himself with friends. Friends that had great values to defend the country or who were geniuses. Friends who would cause him to raise his standards and become a better person. Friends like the Avengers. And lastly, he paid close attention to his family. He always supported the people who helped and supported him. And there was a family he was born with, but later on in life, it was the family that he chose. And so we want to make sure that we're always looking at who we're surrounding ourselves with because we become who we surround ourselves with. Now, another focus on his identity. Spider-Man made sure that he knew who he was at his core. If you see that costume anywhere, you all know that that's Spider-Man. So you want to make sure that you're always staying true to your identity and who you are. There are times, though, where you may not know if who you are is enough. There was a time where Spider-Man decided to put away the costume, take off his masks, and figure out whether it was part of him or whether that's who he was at his core. Sometimes we may need to do that, and if necessary, you can always rebrand yourself. Spider-Man went through a rebranding. It was a little bit darker, not necessarily how people would identify him normally, but there was a time in Spider-Man's life where rebranding who he was served a purpose. But you want to be careful, because sometimes rebranding can get dangerous, and it did for him. So you always want to stay centered and know who you are at your core. Sometimes that rebranding serves a purpose for a short period of time, but you need to let it go and go back to who you are at your center. Lastly, I want to talk about Spider-Man's drive. No matter what pressures he was under, no matter what the world threw at him, he never, ever, ever gave up. He always had to stick to it and to follow through. And by never giving up, it didn't always mean a fight. Sometimes it meant constant and never-ending improvement. Or Kenai, something that I learned from my mentor, Anthony Robbins. He always looked to improve himself. And sometimes that means picking up a book, going to a seminar, surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And lastly, I want to talk to you about Spider-Man's focus. See, in his life, there are villains everywhere. And what's bad is always present, but so is what's good. And if you choose to focus on the good, you can always push yourself forward and move towards the things you really want in life. Remember that the greater the challenge, the greater the hero is needed. You have to decide, who will you show up as? Will you be the guy who focuses on the bad or focuses on the good? Will you be the person who's driven or the one who shrinks back from challenges in life? So, lesson 1, get a strong peer group. Find people that will encourage you. Spider-Man did that, and he found people who would tell him things like, you did a good job, kid. Do you have people who are your cheerleaders in your corner no matter what? You want to find them. Lesson 2, you want to make sure that you have a strong identity and you know who you are. You may need a dark side or a light side, but in the center, you have to always know who you are at your core. You can play with both sides as needed, but make sure you always come back to who you are. The third lesson, always push your limits and never give up. Get out of your comfort zone. If you push your limits, you can overcome hulking-sized obstacles and overcome things that people would never expect you to be able to do. We all face those in life, so make sure that you never, ever, ever give up and push yourself outside your limits. And remember, with great power comes great responsibility. All of you have been given a talent, a skill, a resource in this country, something that most people in the world don't have. Are you going to use it for good, responsibly, to affect your community? I hope so. Something you can learn from a superhero.